How can Salva Kiir save South Sudan, and which Enlightenment philosopher's idea could help him? It was the Second Civil War. It was from 1983 to 2005. It started because President Nyerere cancelled the 1972 Addis Ababa Agreement, and he introduced the Sharia law. The SPLM as well, fought against the government of Sudan, and there were negotiations that took place in 1988 and 1989. They came to a peace agreement and managed to suspend the Sharia law, but this ended when there was a coup in 1989 in Sudan. General Omar al-Bashir took power and still has power to this day. In 1991, you had the most important division that happened in the SPLM and SPLA. The main reason for this was because of the lack of political military high meetings and the failure to hold the SPLM convention. So that resulted with a lot of people doing their own thing. And several leaders started their own armed groups. For example, the SSIM. They were mostly made up of Nuers, and their main goal was to gain arms so that they could fight against their colonel, Garang. But they acted as if their main primary goal was to fight against the Islamic government. The SSIM caused a serious problem to the SPLA from 1991 to 1995. But that wasn't what caused the Second Civil War, and the Second Civil War was ended in 2005 because of the CPA. Who is Salva Kiir? He is a Dinka. In 2005, Salva Kiir became the leader of the SPLM after John Garang died. Kiir was more of a soldier than John Garang. This scared people into thinking that the deal that Garang had made with the Khartoum government would collapse. He took up the position of Vice President of Sudan in order to keep the peace deal signed with Garang. He won the elections a year before South Sudan was independent, and he won by a great margin. He joined the Southern Rebellion in the late 1960s and joined the Sudanese army in 1972. In 1983, he was sent to end the Southern Rebellion, but instead he joined them and helped form the military wing of the SPLM, and that became the Army of South Sudan. In December of 2013, he had accused Riek Machar of attempting to perform a coup. Riek Machar was sacked early that year, and in July from his position as Vice President of South Sudan. He admitted to wanting to become president, but he denied having staged the coup. Having dismissed his whole cabinet is starting to make him look like a dictator, and some people said that he still hasn't made the transition from military to political leader. What problems is South Sudan now facing? South Sudan is now facing a humanitarian crisis. Because you have the most powerful Nuer and the most powerful Dinka having conflict between them, people obviously had to pick sides. Although what happened is their fighting isn't something that's recent. They used to fight a long time ago, although they would use primitive weapons, and this wouldn't kill on such a large scale. It isn't completely just tribal fighting, because you have people from different tribes that pick the opposing side, and a very big problem are the civilians that get killed. A way of thinking of it is as a vendetta. You have one person from group 1 who kills someone from group 2, and that person in group 2 that didn't die, they feel obliged to avenge the person that died in their group. So it goes on, and there's a very dangerous cycle. An example could be the firearm fights in the capital, in Juba, between the Nuer rebels and the government fighters. On the night of December 15, 2013, it was a frightful slaughter of the Nuer men in Juba by the Dinka government superpowers. Numerous armed Nuers subsequently joined the Riek-led opposition, principally to revenge the massacre. The government had been very much aware of the chaos that was happening, although they failed to admit the scale of their crimes. They haven't shown accountability or responsibility for anything, which hints us where this is going to go. Politically speaking, what ideas could Enlightenment philosophers bring, and how could this benefit the country? The head of the UN missions called the international community to South Sudan so that they could investigate if there had been any sort of embezzlement. They found that Salva Kiir accused 75 government officials to have placed a total of $4 billion in foreign banks. The problem Salva Kiir has is that there are a lot of laws that need to be established in order to diminish this corruption or even get rid of it. For example, there isn't something such as a whistleblowing protection law, and there aren't a lot of laws that concern politicians and their duties. Although there are some laws that have been agreed that have been placed but don't have an agreed punishment. These laws are something that the legislative branch should take care of, and this idea came from the Enlightenment philosopher Montesquieu. The judicial branch would form a court where the Nuer and Dinka can reconcile, because there are some crimes that no one has held accountability for, and not having something of this sort has resulted to creating an environment where war can be nursed because people will be angry of the crimes that have occurred or scared that it may be repeated. Thomas Hobbes will say that all civilians should give up their freedom to an absolute ruler that will be able to grant them security and have a chance to excel in life. He would justify the fact that man is greedy, and life would be a free-for-all if there wasn't a strong leader, by referring to South Sudan's history to do with civil wars and how it was awash with weapons, in order to show how strong they became when they worked together. It convinced them to think about how they were when they all had a common enemy, and the things they achieved when they worked together. The biggest thing you can take away from what John Locke says is that conflict should be dealt with in a neutral manner. This would immensely benefit South Sudan because, yes, it is a new country and it needs time, but solving your problems without fighting would allow the country to move on forward a lot faster. Jean-Jacques Rousseau simply believed that the government shaped society. He believed that the government should show integrity and affection rather than having showed so much hatred and corruption. He would say that if Kiir and Machar didn't have that political dispute, then South Sudan would have been less likely to have that humanitarian crisis. What is happening doesn't seem new, and the reason for why I say this is because you have South Sudan, who has a history that was filled with conflict, and now you see the humanitarian crisis. During times like these, South Sudan doesn't really have the chance to excel. I think South Sudan has to first establish peace before they can try and solve their problems. And the humanitarian crisis is going to be a lot harder because hungry people are dangerous people. Even though they have people like the UN helping them, they still need a lot to fix it. This is to say that after solving their problems politically, the rest will follow.